The enemy factory. Most raids don't begin with somebody throwing a brick. They begin with somebody throwing a story and repeating it until fear starts sounding like common sense. Wilmington, 1898. Black and white citizens were working together through the Fusion Coalition. People were voting, doing business, building political power, and apparently getting along a little too well for certain people's comfort. Then, Alex Manly published an editorial. His political opponents pulled it out of context, spread it across North Carolina, and presented black political power like it was the trailer for the end of the world. Election day passed without major violence. 2 days later, armed white men marched to the offices of the Daily Record and set the building on fire. Black residents were killed, families were driven out, elected officials were forced from office, and Alex Waddell became mayor. Nothing says protecting democracy quite like overthrowing an elected government because you didn't like the results. But pay attention to the sequence. The violence didn't create the fear prepared the people for the violence. First, the neighbor becomes suspicious, then suspicious becomes dangerous, then dangerous becomes somebody ought to do something. And somehow, somebody always turns out to be an angry armed mob with terrible impulse control. Then came the Red Summer of 1919, Tulsa in 1921, and Rosewood in 1923. Different cities, different accusations, same basic recipe. Take a rumor, add repetition, sprinkle a little racial fear, and serve it up hot to an angry crowd. Suddenly, people are committing violence while believing they're the ones under attack. That's where ignorance becomes useful. A person can be hardworking, educated, and loving toward their own family while completely carrying out a manufactured picture of what people that they've not ever known. Repeat a lie long enough, and it stops sounding like propaganda. It starts sounding like everybody knows that. No, everybody doesn't know that. Everybody heard that. There's a difference. Being manipulated doesn't excuse violence. If you hurt somebody, you're still responsible. But if we only punish the final reaction and never examine what trained that reaction, we leave the factory open, fully staffed and apparently accepting the government contracts. Social engineering doesn't need everybody believing the same story. One group gets scared, another gets angry, another gives up, another starts looking for somebody to punish. Different reactions, same result. People who could have stood together are now fighting each other. Before the laboratory, before the acronyms, before the classified folders, the experiment was already happening in the street. The lab moves inside. Once Power learned that a newspaper could move a city, the next question was obvious. Why keep yelling from outside the movement when you can put somebody inside it? By the 1960s, political violence had a national audience. JFK was assassinated in 1963, Malcolm X in 65, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy in 68. Fred Hampton was killed by a police raid in 69, and an informant by William O'Neill had infiltrated the Panthers. Different deaths, different evidence. I'm not saying one mysterious supervillain sat in a swivel chair stroking a cat and ordering every assassination. I'm asking, what happens to a generation that keeps watching visible leaders die? A bullet removes the person. The image speaks to everybody else. It can say, this is what happens when you become too loud, too influential, or too difficult to ignore. Some people get scared, some people angrier, some become more committed, some turn the dead into martyrs. Either way, the reaction travels further than bullets. Television didn't invent political violence. It gave it nationwide distribution and commercial breaks. Meanwhile, COINTELPRO had already started. The FBI later acknowledged infiltrating groups, planting distrust, and trying to discredit movements, including groups with little evidence of criminal activity. because apparently violating civil liberty sounds like respectable once you type it in capital letters. Then came MKUltra in 1977. The Senate examined CIA's program of research and behavioral modification. The records covered 149 sub-projects involving drugs, hypnosis, behavioral research, hidden funding, and people who didn't know they were being experimented on. That doesn't prove that the government invented the remote control for the human brain. It proves that they look for the batteries. Then intelligence crossed into media. Project Mockingbird involved CIA surveillance of 2 journalists. That doesn't mean every reporter was taking orders from headquarters. It means the lines between intelligence and journalism got blurry enough to require congressional hearings. And several people suddenly developed selective memory. Then came crack. Justice Department investigators confirmed that major traffickers Oscar Blandon and Norman Menezes supported the Contras to some extent. They didn't prove the CIA created the crack epidemic. Keep both facts. The truth doesn't need protein powder. But look at the reaction. Communities were devastated. Fear dominated television. Politicians competed to look tougher, and crack was punished far more harshly than powder cocaine. Same drug family, different neighborhoods, completely different political enthusiasm. The crisis became policy, and the policy kept damaging people long after cameras found a new emergency. Create the enemy, enter the movement, damage trust, study behavior, shape information, convert fear into policy. At that point, the reaction isn't an accident, it's the product. When fear gets a check. September 11, 2001 didn't just change America because the country was attacked. It changed America because millions watched it happen together. The 9/11 Commission documented failures in intelligence sharing, watch listing, and management. Information existed, but agencies didn't always share it. Apparently, the government had the puzzle pieces, but everybody was guarding their own corner of the box. That's the documented failure. I'm not saying the government staged 9/11. I'm saying failure before the attack and government behavior after it both deserve examination. Those aren't the same claim. Mixing them together is how serious questions get buried beneath somebody yelling about holograms. After 9/11, grief, patriotism, and fear hit at the same time. That combination can inspire courage and make people sign things without reading page 2. 45 days later, the USA Patriot Act became law and expanded surveillance powers. Nothing says examine this carefully like naming a surveillance law Patriot while the nation's still in shock. Then, Homeland Security combined 22 agencies and offices because when agencies fail to communicate, the obvious solution is apparently one enormous group chat. Then came secret detention and enhanced interrogation. The Senate later concluded that the CIA's methods weren't effective for obtaining reliable intelligence and that the agency gave inaccurate information about the program. Public relations really can put a necktie on almost anything. Then Iraq. The Senate found that major claims about weapons of mass destruction were overstated or unsupported. It also described groupthink. Unclear evidence was treated like confirmation, while evidence pointing to the other way got placed somewhere near the office shredder. And there's the pattern. Fear changes how information gets interpreted. Interpretation produces reaction. Reaction becomes surveillance, detention, war, and consent. The attack was real, the victims were real, the trauma was real. That's why reaction carried so much power. The person repeating manufactured fear probably didn't invent it. They may have received it from a president, preacher, news host, or somebody they trusted. That doesn't excuse harm, but humiliation won't educate them. Accountability without education cuts the branches. Education without accountability ignores the bodies beneath the trees. Expose the people designing the deception. Hold institutions accountable. Teach the people trapped inside the lie. Give them facts, patience, and somewhere better to go. Take truth back from propaganda. Take community back from fear. Take government back through voting, organizing, investigation, and oversight. The goal isn't to make everybody agree. It's to become a people who can't be frightened into surrendering our conscience or tricked into treating our neighbor like the enemy. Fear may get a blank check, but we're still the ones signing it.
All of us have learned over the years is deeply troubling. What you will see is an accumulation of facts and disturbing patterns of behavior. The facts in Iraq's behavior demonstrate that Saddam Hussein and his regime have made no effort to disarm as required by the international community. Indeed, the facts in Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more